of the Count of Monte Cristo up until this point. So the first thing we know that happens is Dantes is arrested, and this is because he helped deliver a letter to Napoleon on the Isle of Elba, and that was actually a crime. Even though he was just doing a favor for a dying captain, it was a crime against Louis XVIII. He's accused of being a Bonapartist and put in prison unfairly. And the reason why is because he knows that the letter, he brought a parcel back for a character named Nortier, and he doesn't know that the judge that's put on his case is related to Nortier. So the judge, Villefort, is about to let him go, but then he says a name that he really shouldn't know, and that's Nortier. So Dantes doesn't know, though, that Nortier is Villefort's father. And he goes to jail. He suffers greatly for 14 years, but for 4 years he's alone. He doesn't have the help of his friend, the Abbé. After 4 years, he decides to die via strangulation, and then he decides to starve himself. But he hears a sound, and this Abbé breaks in. He actually was planning an escape, but turned out that he miscalculated. So they become great friends, and the Abbé teaches him everything he knows, like all these different languages, and I assume how to read other languages. And the Abbé also tells him about a treasure. And Dantes is dubious about this because a lot of the people in the prison said that the Abbé was mad. But everything else with the Abbé checks out. But Dantes finds out via, I guess the Abbé helps him figure out who would benefit from him being imprisoned. Okay, sorry. And those people are Cateru, the neighbor, Danglars, Fernand, and Villefort. So they all kind of need him out of the way. And sadly, the Abbé ends up dying of a third attack, which is very dramatic. And Dantes, not to disrespect Abbé or anything, he decides to sneak in the body bag. And he ends up he thought that the graveyard would be where they would let him out, but they end up throwing him into the sea. And there's a storm, and there's a boat capsizes, and he thinks really quickly. He ends up grabbing a sailor's hat, and he pretends like he's a smuggler. Some of the ship that comes to try to rescue thinks that he may not be legitimate. They ask him a lot of questions, but he's such a good sailor, and he speaks Italian and all these other languages where they just think, oh, well, if he is a bad guy, he can sure sail, and we need somebody who can sail. So basically, he waits 3 months until he goes to the Isle of Monte Cristo. He's very sneaky. He's very covert about finding the treasure. He ends up just taking some of the jewels. He buys himself a small yacht, not to attract attention. It has a secret compartment, and he's able to kind of get a lot of the jewels off the island without being detected. But this treasure is beyond our imaginations. He then disguises himself as a priest called Abbé Busoni. He goes to visit the old neighbor, Cateru, to find out what his enemies have been doing. And he claims that he's going to give the friends of Edmond Dantes a diamond, but Cad, the neighbor, says, no, these are no friends. He describes Fernand as, he changes his name, and he bought the title of Count, and he's married to Mercedes. They have a son. They both live in Paris. But now Fernand styles himself de Morcerf. He has a dubious past in the army. We also know that he married Mercedes. I already said that. We know that Baron Danglars is now very wealthy. He owns a bank. And we know that Villefort is still a prosecutor in Paris, and he has a family. I think that's, yeah. And so Dantes, just as the Abbé, ends up giving Cad the diamonds. But in the other version of the book, we know the diamond brings the neighbor no sort of good fortune. It actually turns out to be ill fortune because he uses it for evil gain. But we know that Dantes wants revenge. Dantes also finds out about Immoral. He finds out that Immoral is in trouble. So he brings a letter to Julie, Immoral's daughter, and says, follow the directions of Sinbad the sailor. There's going to be a red silk purse. The importance of the red silk purse is that Dante's father died while Dante was in prison. This is very sad. And Immorel, with his great kindness, ended up paying for Dante's father's funeral, which was very dangerous because Dante was a Bonapartist. So Immorel kind of stuck his neck out for Dante, so he ends up, um, Dante's wants to help him. So the family is almost in ruin. Like Dante's ends up going to the prison dressed as this character, Lord Wilmore, who's a lawyer. He's a representative of Thompson and French. And he ends up taking files on the Abbey and Edmond Dantes. He also finds Villefort's letter of condemnation, and he also buys up all of Morel's old debt from this M. de Beauville. And M. de Beauville's ready to get rid of that debt. Like, he doesn't think Morel can pay. And in fact, Morel's last ship, we know, has been sunk in a hurricane, but it's like his last hope. And Lord Wilmore goes to visit Morel. I don't know why no one recognizes Dante's. He's a master of disguise, I guess. And he ends up like telling him, or Thompson and French has bought up all the debt. So you got 3 more months to try to pay it. But we all know Morel can't pay it. And it's going to ruin his daughter's life and his son's life. It's just going to bring so much shame. So Morel plans to kill himself on the 5th of September if he can't pay, to regain his honor, I guess. But in 2020, we don't want to do that. It's okay to be in debt. There's other ways to get around it. Back then it was shameful. So turns out that the red silk purse is delivered. It's got a diamond in it. It's got Julie's dowry, and Dante ends up buying a new ship, the Pharaon, and it sails into the harbor. Morel's really confused at that moment. He doesn't have time to figure out, thank you, that was Dante's. He's just shocked and shook because he's about to kill himself with 2 pistols. So we know there's a man on the dock with a beard who's watching this happy scene, Morel being saved and his family being happy. We know that's Dante's because he says, "Farewell to kindness and gratitude. Now may the God of vengeance allow me to punish the wicked." But there's no God of vengeance. Like, we know that, and that biblically would be incorrect to go seek vengeance. But Dante's is convinced that God supports his plan, because why else would he allow him to escape? Why else would he allow him to find a treasure beyond our imagination? He just thinks, like, that's all, like, God wants me to turn around and punish these bad guys, like Batman in Gotham. So after the Morel family saved, I think a few years go by, Dante's knows that there's these 2 figures, Albert and Franz, in Rome, and he plans like this kidnapping of Albert. So Albert turns up in Rome with his friend Franz. They're looking around Rome because it's amazing if you've ever been there. They go see the Colosseum. They don't show up at all with carriages or costumes during the carnival, which is kind of irresponsible and not good planning. They're told that the city is unsafe at night and that it's run by bandits. And so the hotel owner, he tells them, like, be very careful. Albert and Franz don't listen. They go to the Coliseum at night. Franz is kind of sitting there by himself. Albert is with the guide, and Franz watches a cloaked man talk to some of the bandits in the darkness of the Coliseum. I'm suspecting that cloaked man that is talking to the bandits is the Count of Monte Cristo, and that he knows that Franz is watching, okay, because he's got his plan. We find out that a character named Peppino, who's a poor shepherd who just delivered a letter, this is much like Dante's, is going to be condemned to be decapitated. Yikes. And Franz is watching all this. And then the meeting is broken up. Oh my gosh, because the cloaked figure hears a noise. But Franz finds out later that the man that's called the Count of Monte Cristo is the same man that was talking to the bandits. That doesn't mean that he is a bandit, but that means, like, he's trying to help poor Peppino. And so maybe he can help Franz. Because later, Albert gets kidnapped by bandits. But we know that this is all Dante's master plan in order to pretend like he's saving Albert. Okay? So he comes in and he ends up saving the day. And the only thing that he wants is to be introduced to French society. And Albert doesn't really He's not really concerned that this man's trying to hurt him because he offers him a carriage. He offers him a spot at the execution. Like, why would this man try to hurt me? He's so kind. He's so wealthy and powerful. What does he really want from me? But Franz cautions Albert. He says, I don't really trust him all the way. Be careful. Also, Albert's mom cautions him too. He says, I know that you're a man about the world and you can handle your own affairs. You're 19 or whatever, but just be careful. Okay, so it turns out to be a breakfast 3 months later in Paris. So all these people are at the breakfast. So it's Albert, Beauchamp, Chateau Renaud, and then surprisingly, Max Morel shows up. This is not M. Morel. M. Morel's passed away at this time. But Max is this brave army. I don't know, was he a sergeant? Was he a captain? I can't remember. But he ended up, like, every 5th of September, apparently he does some sort of brave act. And he ended up saving Chateau Renaud's life from some Arabs. Okay, I'm not saying that. It's from the book. And I guess Chateau Renaud was about to get his head cut off. That's crazy. So actually, I think like this hero and anti-hero, Dante's, they're kind of juxtaposed, so we understand like Dante's is this fragmented, messed up character now with all these different personalities, not really a hero, whereas like Max is an actual hero and saves someone. So he's being introduced to French society too. And we might have interruptions here because we have 10 more minutes before class starts, so just bear with me here. And let's see. I tried to make this video 4 times yesterday, and I failed. All right, so turns out that the Count meets Mercedes. She has a feeling. She's not sure. There's also a portrait that the Count admires. There's so much dramatic irony here. The Count meets with Baron Danglars. He presents a letter to Baron Danglars. Of course, like Danglars does not recognize him, but the letter says that Dantes has unlimited credit as the Count of Monte Cristo to furnish his fancy mansion on the Champs-Élysées. I hope I said that right. And the letters from the lawyers of Thomson and French, and the reader will know that Thomson and French is Dantes. Danglars is a little confused about a letter saying Dantes has unlimited credit. I mean, all credit cards have a limit, sadly. That's just so you don't hang yourself with the trouble, like you don't get yourself in trouble with debt. So, but Danglars, in order to maintain the Count's respect and to show he's a macho man, he pretends there's no problem with the letter of unlimited credit. And the Count, showing off, stunting on him or flexing on him, like the kids say, buys these horses. And he wants the best horses. He's kind of a brat about it, and they belong to Madame Baroness Danglars. Now she gets mad at Danglars. She's like, how dare you sell my horses? And Danglars like, but this guy offered twice the price. Dantes acts like, I shouldn't say Dantes. He's not Dantes anymore, guys. He's like this evil man, the Count of Monte Cristo. He has done some good things, but he clearly has a master plan, and everyone's in his web of lies. But he ends up returning the horses with diamonds in their headdresses. What? Just showing off. And that afternoon, I guess Madame Baroness Danglars lends the horses to Villefort's new wife and son. I guess they've probably been married for about 8 years, but the horses are seized by a wild fit, and miraculously Dante's servant, Ali, who smokes this chibouque and he has a lasso, I think he's a mute, he ends up saving, this is like stuff out of a fairy tale, but he ends up saving Madame Villefort and her son, his name's Edward, from these wild horses. And then the Count is conveniently introduced to Madame Villefort and her son. He also revives them with these potions and pills, which he tells Madame Villefort's son, like, don't touch those, sonny, because Madame Villefort's son is, like, he's not ruled by any boundaries at all. We also find out that Heidi is the Count's servant. She's in love with the Count, but he just seeks her friendship only. He says, I'm broken. You don't want me. He says, but don't tell anyone the secret of your birth. We're about to read that chapter right now about the secret of her birth. He also tells her that she's free, and now that she's on French soil, she doesn't have to be a slave anymore. But she likes to be a slave. She doesn't do anything that would denote slavery, by the way, so don't be thinking like that. So the Count ends up visiting Max and his family. He can't really get out of this meeting because Max invites him. He's trying to harden his heart against his enemies, but Like, he has this soft spot for Max. He was shook when he saw Max at the breakfast. The Morel family has this, I don't know, it's not a creepy shrine, but to me, I'd be a little weirded out by it. It's kind of sweet. It's a shrine that shows, like, it pays homage to Edmond Dantes, because finally, in Morel, before his death, realized that it was probably the ghost of Edmond Dantes that saved their family. And the red silk purse is in this case, and the Count ends up turning pale. I think to the reader, there's a lot of dramatic irony there, and a possibility that there is still good in him, like he still has some goodness. And Julie recognizes the Count's voice as possibly the Sinbad the Sailor figure, or the man who brought the message to Julie earlier in the book. In the chapter Toxicology, Madame Villefort asks about the potion that Monte Cristo ended up giving Edward. And they discuss potions. Madame Villefort reveals, maybe it's not Madame Villefort, I think it's Valentine reveals that she had met the Count years before. Everyone thought the Count was some sort of magician or doctor, but he just revived a man in Italy. And Madame Villefort ends up receiving a prescription for this potion to take a little bit each day in order to avoid, like, being poisoned. Now, does Monte Cristo know that he's given poison to a woman that may be absolutely nuts? Yes. His quote is, "Here is fruitful soil." This is on 244. "I'm convinced the seed that I have sown has not fallen on barren ground." So he knows he's planted evil, and he knows it's going to ruin the Villefort family. I guess he wants to see if he can plan, like, will Villefort finally tell the truth when his own family is conflicted with this evil plot that's destroying them. Oh, I've got 5 more minutes, so I have to go fast. In the meantime, we find out that old Nortier is stuck in a wheelchair. All he can do is blink his eyes and communicate. He takes a little bit of poison each day. He's got a servant named Berrois, and Berrois takes care of him. We know that the Saint Mirans, those are Valentine's grandparents, not Edward's grandparents, have fallen ill mysteriously. Like, grandpa ends up dying before grandma, but grandma says, like, she's seen a cloaked figure in her room, a white figure. She saw her body outside of her own body, and she knows she's going to join her husband soon, but she wants Valentine to get married as soon as possible to Franz. Valentine's a sweetheart. She takes care of her old grandpa, so I don't want anything bad to happen to her. We also know that Monte Cristo's bribed a telegraph operator to report fake news about, like, Spanish bonds. It ends up destroying Danglars' finances because Monte Cristo does it over and over again. It also sows unrest in the Danglars household. Like, they no longer trust this character Debray. They already don't like each other, Madame Baroness and the Baron Danglars. And they stop exchanging information for those goodies. I'll explain that to you when you're older kids. But basically, we as an audience learned that Danglars, when he first started joking about, like, the finances, is now actually in financial trouble. And this is also brought on by, like, Monte Cristo borrowing lots of money, these new Italian princes that seem a little shady borrowing money. So Danglars, like, a little tight on funds. And then, okay, we as an audience learned that actually Valentine being engaged to Franz, this is a arranged marriage, but Valentine is in love with this character, Max Morel, and it's very cute. They're in the garden. They're, like, talking between a fence, I believe, and they're this Romeo and Juliet tale. Like, you don't want to be Romeo and Juliet, by the way. They commit suicide, spoiler alert. But let's see. We find out that Max can't live without her. There's a summer ball at Mercedes and Fernand's estate. Monte Cristo and Mercedes meet. She gets really mad at him because he won't eat grapes. He won't eat peaches under their roof. So she ends up throwing the peaches, and she calls the Count stubborn and inflexible. He won't call himself her friend. He calls himself her servant. Sorry, this is a lot. I'm trying to go fast here because the bell's getting ring. I'm making a video. Yep. Both of Valentine's grandparents, like I said, they Saint Marian's die. The doctor in Villefort's household believes that there's some sort of poison going on. Like he thinks it's a substance that's vegetable poison, but he's not entirely sure. They both decide to keep this fact a secret so they can draw out the murderer. But it looks like Valentine's guilty because, I mean, like she's the only one that stands to gain a great fortune in the book so far. Nortier suggests that he'll help Valentine out of this arranged marriage, but he doesn't say how because he can't talk. Of course, we know that. But he says he'll help her. Franz, okay, before that happens, Max ends up meeting with Nortier, and Nortier also promises he will help Max. And he approves of Max, apparently. Franz gets to France and he ends up visiting with Villefort Valentine. There's some secret documents that were hidden in the old man's desk. I guess they were locked up. It's revealed that Norte was a president of a Bonapartist club. We already knew that as an audience. And we find out that Franz's father was blindfolded and ended up fighting old Nortier back in his younger days. And this is a legitimate duel, but it turns out like that Franz's father was killed, and now Franz is told like why he had to grow up without a father, basically. And this kind of destroys him. He refuses to marry Valentine. Valentine's embarrassed too because she's terrified. She knows her grandpa's killed this man and because he had these wounds. Valentine tells Max that the engagement is off, and Max is forever grateful to her old grandpa. But the danger is not over in the Villefort household. Like, there's still a murderer, and as an audience member, I know who it is. The marriage between Eugenie and Albert is kind of undecided too. Danglars gets more and more interested in coupling his daughter with one of the Italian princes, the younger one. Why? Because he's facing financial ruin, and he's getting more and more desperate. And then he starts digging in Fernand's past. Monte Cristo won't claim these strangers. He doesn't want them to be traced back to them. And he also doesn't want to be traced back to them digging into Fernand's past. And this is where we are in the novel right now. Albert gets to meet Monte Cristo's slave. And Monte Cristo says, you can tell the story, but don't tell the secret of your birth.